Hello and welcome to my ultimate Endless Legend 2 beginner's guide, with time cards down below for each section if it's not quite for you. Let me take you through most everything I think you'll need to know to master Endless Legend 2. I'll assume you have some knowledge of video games, but at the same time, I want this to be as beginner-friendly as possible. Hopefully there'll be some EL2 tips and tricks along the way for just about everybody. Anyways, you know while you're here, so now that you've clicked the subscribe button, wink wink, let's jump straight into the video. Before we get into the actual game itself, I think it makes sense to very quickly talk about game settings and options, and obviously choosing your faction here is the main thing. I'd suggest you spend a little bit of time reading through each one. They are very distinct, and they have a flair down the bottom. So you can see that, for example, King of Sheridan are defenders, and for what it's worth, they are my recommendation for the easiest faction to play. They're generally fairly straightforward, defensive in nature, and they have some powerful abilities. I don't necessarily think that they are the quote-unquote best faction, though. You might also want to consider the Last Lords, who, as you'll note, do not require food at all to grow. Instead, they eat dust, money, or gold, whatever you'd like to call it. Or maybe you'll go on the aggressive with the necrophages. Take note here, again, there are loads of idiosyncrasies and asymmetries with the factions. Here the necrophage can have only one city, the den of their queen, and they'll generate their own currency called corpses. More on currencies as we move through. The optimal game setup will be on a large map with 5 total players including yourself. That way you'll avoid the need to duplicate enemies. The default difficulty over on the right hand side here is Explorer. That's generally going to be pretty good for you. However, if you're a new player, do not be afraid to pull your difficulty back and just experiment around. If you've played a few strategy games like I have, you're probably going to need to up this. So after customizing the colors and symbols of my enemies from a very limited selection on offer, let's begin. We start in the very early game. Of note, you can turn on yield icons as well as hexagonal grids, and quite a few other things actually around the UI, which is very much subject to change in this early access build. Hopefully, this video won't go out of date too soon. I suggest you send your units out far and wide. However, the broader advice in Endless Legend 2 is to always move in a fairly strong and consistent army, for there are enemies everywhere and you could be attacked at any time, like these dudes, the independent villages you'll find around the map. During your early exploration, you want to keep an eye out for a few things. It includes tiles that have particularly high yields. These are often called resources or anomalies, like this tile here. There are also a variety of curiosities or discoveries, goody huts around the map, which will give you a one-off boost to your yields or more when you find them. Finally, don't be afraid to spend a little bit of time wandering around and exploring. One of the great things about Endless Legend 2 is this bonus up the top here, a prepared settlement. The first city that you found will provide a whole load of bonuses to all of the things it needs to produce. Food, industry, dust, or money, science, and influence, depending on how long you explore. Simply put, you can wander around the map and explore, and when you found your city, it'll make up for lost time and give you some bonus yield. So here I am on turn 4 with any old unit moving down to found my city, in this case my capital. The game's recommendations are generally pretty good. They'll find you the maximum resource-laden tiles, and you can just go ahead and found your first city. We can continue to explore and capture new territories. Territories start as camps. The first city is an exception. We'll get to camps and exploration and attaching territories a little later on, but I thought it was important to note here. If you've seen my review for Endless Legend 2, you'll already know this, so I'll keep it quick, but it really matters. Urban development and city building here essentially has 3 layers. Layer 1 is this, the foundation layer. This is generally built almost always with influence, and it allows you to expand out your city to connect more yield. At the moment, my city is producing 15 food per turn, and this will help to grow populations. If I spend some influence and grab this foundation, I'm now getting 16. Why? Because this tile had 1 food. It also gave me 1 extra science to help me research new technologies. New cities will start with some foundations around the outside, so where you place it absolutely matters. And also, this builds up the first layer, the foundational layer, and allows us to now build districts. Unlocked using science through the technology tree, there are some core types of district. Generally, there's one for each yield type. The merchant house makes money. The lab makes science. And the forum produces influence. You get the idea. I wouldn't stress too much about district placement apart from following some really basic key rules. Firstly, look at the tile. What is it doing? This one is producing food and industry. So I could produce an industry district, a works, and that would provide a little bit of extra industry thanks to the tile already producing some. You can see the details in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen at any time to try and figure out the adjacency bonuses that you can get. The physical geography of the map also matters here a little bit. I mean, you will have noticed on the industrial tile that things like ridges can provide a little bit of extra industry, so being near a hill. Being near other districts also matters, like the communal habitations. And finally, and I reckon most importantly, anomalies or resources. Building in and around them matters a lot. As far as early game districts go, the lab, the science district, is by far and away the greatest benefactor of anomalies, receiving +2 science at the moment for each adjacent anomaly. There are some other districts like future economic districts, the trade hub, another great one to build, that also benefits from being near certain things, resources. Let's cover off the final major functions of a city now that we know foundations and districts. The third one are improvements. These are researched through the technology tree. They provide generic buffs to the center tile of the city, usually. You'll notice this one is currently receiving a lot of yield from just the very first improvement alone. Next, cities will train our military units as we unlock them. They can be a little time-consuming to train, but you're gonna need at least a couple of armies by the time you get to the early mid-game, so you'll need to prioritize them somewhere. Maybe not early on, and maybe not in the first city, though. The final tab that really matters here is this one, population. These are the people within our city, and this is what the food goes towards. It goes towards growing, for lack of a better word, new populations, as well as feeding the existing ones. Populations will vary based on the faction you're playing, those of you who've assimilated, etc., but the main thing to understand is that down the bottom here, within the city user interface, you can move them around and change the yields of your city. Artisans will produce, in this case, more industry. Scribes will lean more into things like science and influence, while core citizens will work the farms and therefore grow more. Exactly where you want to place them is ultimately up to you, your strategy, your growth strategy. Generally, getting some population online early is a good idea, so citizens and artisans, while scribes may help later on as you look to grow and research more. If you can't be bothered managing it, don't stress. Just over on the right-hand side here, set it to balanced and forget. Finally, if you run out of places, i.e. your city is just growing too quickly, don't forget to go back to the districts and build another communal habitations. This is the surefire way to add extra slots, or population vocations as the game calls them. Finally, there is a landscaping tile. This will be more useful to you potentially as you move through the game and start to pick up more barren tiles, but it is here nonetheless. And finally here, my ultimate tip for this section. Unfortunately at the moment, this is one of the issues with the UI. Hopefully this will change if you're watching this video in the future, but there is a little eeny-weeny tiny buyout button up the top right-hand side here. You can see I can spend 60 gold or dust to finish the construction of this building. That's massive. Absolutely massive. This will allow you to speedrun your way through many different sections of the game, particularly for the Last Lords or any empire producing a decent amount of dust per turn. Do not overlook dust and use this buyout button frequently. This magical little buyout button seriously is your best friend to surging up these early game yields. I cannot stress enough how good it is. Finally, you'll note that district costs will scale a little bit if you've built a lot of one particular district, and a few other reasons. So providing a little bit of balance and specializing can be a good idea. I don't have a merchant's house yet. It makes sense for me to build one somewhere. What does it benefit from? Well, it benefits from being next to communal habitations. So maybe I want to get some of those down first, potentially expanding out my foundations to a new area where I could build them, and then build even more in and around the improvement. While your early game city building is going on, there are a couple of other things that you'll need to prioritize fairly quickly. They are quests and the independent factions around you. Let's start with quests. These are an integral part of the game. You can see at the moment I have the missing youth. Search Mosaic Halls. Clicking the little locate objective button shows me, oh, wow, would you look at that? It's right next door. So I need to wander over here and search this tile. Okay, fairly straightforward. Once I do it, I receive my quest reward and likely queue up another one as I rudely skip through the lore. Yes, indeed. Destroy a necro horde and gain 100 influence. I begin the quest, locate the next objective, and oh wow, it's right next door! How lucky for me. The second part of this puzzle will be the minor factions that I'm constantly discovering in and around the map here. If you click on them, you'll notice they have an assimilation effect, and they also tend to be their own very unique race. Should we assimilate them, we'll be able to eventually build their units and incorporate their populations into our cities. In order to win these guys over, we're going to need to firstly approach them with an army, and then choose an option. We could choose to attack the village, pacifying it, and if we can do it to all of their villages within their one territory, that's a win for us. Secondly, in the middle here, we could choose to parley, to talk to them, pick up a quest, and if we complete it, they'll be our friend. Finally, we could just buy them out. In exchange for a little bit of dust, we will buy out this village, and very handily early on, get one of their units for free. This is a great way to replenish or build an army as you move your way through the map. Take note though, as bribing one isn't enough, you'll notice here this Salusk village is still hostile, even though this one has been pacified. That's because I'll actually need to come over here and either bribe or fight this one as well. The quest may be a little bit easier to bring them all on board, but it really depends on what it might be. So it's a little bit of a risk, but honestly, generally, a pretty safe option too. Once you've completed the quest or successfully dealt with all of the villages within a defined territory, of course defined by these dotted lines, you'll then be able to click the Protectorates button and assimilate the faction. It's probably also a reasonable idea here to found a camp and claim their territory for myself. Before I can get to that though, interrupting your broadcast with this news, the weather has changed. One of the huge parts of Endless Legend 2 is its dynamic map system, divided between Monsoon and Tidefall seasons, and usually shown with a little cutscene in between like this. You'll notice the map has completely changed, as a Monsoon has arrived. The game does a great job at telling you that there'll be dangers here, you'll get increased money from fighting enemies, the map will be harder to navigate and see, all kinds of things. The main thing that you need to know is that the tides are changing and the map is expanding. Each Monsoon can introduce new mechanics or resources, particularly once the Tidefall part happens, the part 2. Also, curiosities get even better, so it's a great time to wander around and get some more of those. And in a very quick callback to our previous section, now that I've settled the territory, I can assimilate these guys and they'll provide their assimilation effect, a whole load of extra health for me. I can unlock more slots in the game's technology tree. Having a few extra units around during the Monsoon season is very helpful, even just in your starting territory, because of the extra anomalies and discoveries that will appear, as well as the parts of the map that will open up after the Monsoon is over. It's a good idea to be preparing a second army, even if it's just a relatively small one at this point. Oh, and a quick note, of course, at any time you can track the progress of the seasons down the bottom right-hand side of your screen by the End Turn button. It's a fairly broad prediction, right? At the moment, it's somewhere between 1 and 19 turns, so not necessarily the easiest thing to predict, but you can at least get a rough gauge for how long you might be spending during this very depressing yet exciting Monsoon season. As you're plotting your expansion, it's generally a good idea to try and claim territories with camps that are next to the ones you already have. This will make building cities much easier as you move through the game. And now we arrive at the end of the Monsoon season. You'll again get another cutscene that you can skip, but this one really matters. You'll notice that as this magical event is occurring, and the screen is shaking like crazy, that the tides move out. This is massive for the game. It will reveal new territories that we could terraform, that will have new discoveries, anomalies, independent people, as well as resources. Each Tidefall event We'll unlock a couple of extra resources that we can buy, sell, and trade, and maybe even win the game with. It'll also revert us back to the glowing, glorious, sunny view of Endless Legend 2. Where previously my capital here had basically nothing around it, now that Tidefall has occurred, you can see there are actually a whole load of territories for me to capture, settle. There are question marks with curiosities, quests, and resources. There's all sorts of stuff here, and it tends to be very good. As you explore the question marks, you'll also continue to pick up more quests. These will feature throughout the game, and sometimes there'll be decision points, like taking on a battle to take some money, or getting some extra gear for your heroes, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. On the quests, though, I would encourage you to complete them. They generally provide good resources. Of course, they'll actually explain the wonderfully rich lore of the game. If you want to check them at any time, you can head over, not to the victory screen, though you will follow the generic quests here, but more importantly, you can head over to the quest journal. Faction, pacification, and world quests can be tracked here or replayed. On this screen, you'll also notice some dastardly deeds over on the right-hand side. I wouldn't stress too much about these. If you're a new player, honestly, don't worry about them at all. If you're a more experienced player, though, and you have kind of a good feel for the game, I would encourage you to shoot for a couple of these. Be the first to eliminate at least 30 units. You get an extra movement on all of your units. At Tidefall 2, be the first to have 3 cities. A generally very easy and achievable one will allow you to build an extra city with no penalty by increasing your city cap. Or get out there and clear fortresses, these kind of wonders, these military independent fortifications around the map. Clear 6 of them and you'll get a bonus 10 damage per unit. Not to be overlooked for the extra for experts or even kind of moderate players among us, I think. With a Necro Horde still to defeat, let's move on now to both heroes and combat. And we'll actually start with heroes, despite me being ready for a fight here. Heroes are your core units. They will lead armies, though they don't have to. They'll have their own specializations. You can see here, Uwe Rach is a ranged hero, and they can level up and improve their passive and active skills, as well as equip gear. You can select them down here at any time, or find the hero screen over on the right-hand side. There it is, the heroes circle, to customize them there. The equipment for your heroes, your gear, should always be equipped. It'll increase their damage and their skills a lot. Take this dust-infused bow, providing determination, might, and an extra 55 damage. Goodness gracious me. There's also wearables, consumables, accessories, and in future, pets. You might be wondering, though, what's resilience? What's might? Why does it matter? Let's move to another screen, the skill tree. This one is huge. As you level up your heroes by sending them into the fight, generally, maybe some quests, you'll be able to unlock these skills. There are so many here, I obviously can't go over all of them. Some are unique to the faction that you're playing, generally on the right-hand side. Others will be unique to the hero's class. In this case, we're looking at an archer. Passive skills like Guiding Light just kind of happen, right? They happen passively. It's a generic buff, perhaps, to your hero or their army. In this case, Guiding Light adds 5 damage to non-hero ranged units. So it's quite specific, but if this guy's got some archers in his army, they'll get an extra 5 damage as I confirm my spend and spend my hero point on this passive skill. Active skills act a little bit like spells. They are used manually in a fight, or the AI will use them for you. In this case, the recovery shot active skill is used actually on a friendly unit, and it restores 30 health by default to the targeted units. Like a lot of skills, there's something more going on under the hood here. In this case, I will restore extra health per determination or per resilience. What does that mean? Well, they're over here on the right-hand side, right? Here we have might, next resilience, followed by intuition, and lastly determination. I can use my hero points to buy these skills, or add extra points over here to my attributes. And as we've already covered, the attributes will buff skills. Going back to our Guiding Light, I'll do an extra damage per point of intuition. So I move back over to the right-hand side of the screen, intuition, the brain one, oh, I've got none. Huh, okay. In this case, no extra damage. But what about the other one, the recovery shot? Well, that benefits from determination and resilience. And as luck would have it, those are two things that I do a little bit better in. I have 2 points in each of those, so I'll deal an extra 8 damage for the determination and an extra 6 damage for the resilience. Nice to have. Finally, heroes can build havens, their own unique districts. They also have their own traits here under their profile, as well as their own lore and relationships with other heroes in the map. Truly, it feels like an RPG game when we're inside of the hero view. I might choose to add Rika as my friend. If we're in the same army, we'll deal an extra 20% damage. I have companions, as well as nemesis or enemies that I can build up over time, depending on who I'm fighting against. It's a wonderful system that I'd encourage you to throw as many points, get as much experience from fighting as you can. It seriously makes or breaks combat in this game. The greatest use case for our mighty heroes is therefore almost always going to be combat. So, here's a fight I've prepared earlier. Let's jump in. Combat can happen in neutral territory, it could happen in enemy territory if you're at war, depending on your border arrangements, but what you really need to know is there are 2 ways to approach it. You can instantly resolve a fight. You'll get a preview of what's going to happen. In this case, on the right-hand side, I can see both enemy units are dying. They've been crossed out. And on my side, I'll take a little bit of damage, but really not that much. So instant resolve would be totally fine here. Let me do it. Bam! The fight is done. I receive some rewards. No weapons, but a little bit of cash. And that's it, right? Combat over. There'll be other times where you don't want to insta-resolve. You want to manually do the fight instead. If you click the manual resolve option to test your own combat skills, you'll be thrown into a round-by-round fight within the world map. You can see the white boundary here dictates where I can move during this fight. It will take place round by round, but within one game turn. So I can leave it, come over here. Let's say I want to focus on my city. Okay, cool, my improvement, my actually unique to me improvement, influence on my military districts. A great win for the Kin of Sheridan is underway. I could manage this. Maybe I manage my population. I want some extra citizens to grow faster. Or I need to finish my technology, so I'm moving over as scribes, regardless of what it is. I can do all of this and then return to the fight within the same game turn. My hero here has an active skill. Again, these active skills can be manually used. In this case, it gives 45 shield to a targeted unit. So I could say, hey, Gorilla Boy, take my shield. Actively using that skill and using the hero's turn, mind you. This unit's now supercharged with a shield. It's going to move into the forest for extra defense because, again, terrain matters just like it does when you're building your cities. It also matters in combat. Holding high ground or moving into forest for cover is generally a very good idea. Keeping units together can also help prevent flanking maneuvers by the enemy. All of these things, your positioning on the map really does matter, so keep that in mind if you're doing the manual fight. If you can't get close enough to an enemy, it is generally a good idea to move to high ground, move to cover, and then defend, adding your defensive stance and giving you a little bit of extra strength for the next round. That is, assuming the enemy is actually going to come and fight you. In this case, my shielded, massive ape boy is going to hopefully block a lot of this vampirical fighting that's going on. The enemy has blood mending, as you can see by clicking on them. Blood mending restores 35% health to this unit and adjacent friendly units. So if you're manually fighting, I would encourage you to click on the enemy and have a look at these skills. Now that I know that the enemy benefits from being adjacent to another one while they're fighting and healing themselves, I know that I should probably try and break up this fight, right? I need to get in the middle and try and destroy the central unit. If at any point the manual fight feels a little bit complicated for you, this is a beginner's guide after all. You don't need to know every unit, every promotion, every damage stat, every critical hit chance over here. Maybe you want to take it a little easier. Well, to speed it up, you could swap the animation battle speed to fast down the bottom. Or, down the bottom left here, you could swap to auto. This isn't only to speed things up, by the way. I would recommend it to new players. In fact, I'd recommend it almost more than instantly resolving a fight, even though weirdly you may get different results, because it lets you see what the AI would do. Is it going to be perfect? No. But you can see how it groups its units, what it chooses to attack with, and get a better feel for the game. Ultimately, this was a successful fight regardless of how I chose to approach it, and we get a little bit of extra gear and some more money to spend. Finally, real quick on combat here, you may be moving around the map, exploring, expanding to different territories. In general, you'll have a much better time if you have a lot of units within an army, and if you keep armies relatively close to one another so they can reinforce. So if you're struggling, try and group up your units and try and keep multiple armies within 3-ish tiles. Oh, same goes, by the way, if you've got an enemy settling frustratingly close to you and you want to capture their city, move in multiple armies, siege it for a few turns to destroy its defenses. You'll be away and laughing. And before we move on from this topic, wow, look at this. Great pose. Dude, down here, this is the Chosen. A Juggernaut unit, high damage, lots of health, and unique to me as the kin of Sheridan. Let's quickly talk faction uniques. In this case, my Righteous Wrath passive skill adds damage equal to 50% of my unit's shield. That can be super powerful. Most factions will have unique units like these Juggernaut here as the kin of Sheridan that they can train, or they may have unique districts that they can build. You will generally, in fact almost always, want to build their unique districts or the districts that they benefit a lot from. As kin of Sheridan, I benefit from defensive districts like keeps. So, building these keeps out far and wide is a great idea for me. Some factions have other unique abilities. If you're playing as the diplomatic Coral Boys, you'll be able to assimilate factions for free rather than paying influence. Here, as the kin of Sheridan, I benefit from my Strength of Zeal. Again, leaning into my military districts is a good idea, for I need to build up my fortification value to unlock my unique benefits. What are they, you may ask? Well, they're up the top here, and they're very powerful. Essentially, I have 5 one-off abilities, effects that I can use, at the cost of, generally speaking, a little bit of influence. The final one, Wrath of Skies, is basically like a military strike, dealing damage to an army located on a tile on the map. It's really cool! Not all faction abilities will be this aggressive, though. Sometimes they're circumstantial, they play out on armies or the map. Take Rejuvenation here. At the cost of 50 influence, I can use Rejuvenation on an army to give them extra movement. So let's take this army here as an example. Maybe there's a curiosity, discovery I want to come over here and grab. Cool, done. Let's use my ability. Bam. And now I can move them again. Maybe to send them into a fight like this one to get rid of the enemy from my territory. My general advice with faction uniques is to lean into them as much as possible. They're not always going to be the best decision for you, but they tend to be very powerful. Speaking of faction uniques, as I crush some bugs here in an instant resolution, it's probably time that we talk about the technology tree. You will have made decisions about your technologies fairly early on in the game. And as you look to click on camps you've founded, click Attach to City and attach them up to your city, thus expanding out the buildable area and connecting more yields and more population potential to your city, your technologies, down the bottom here on the research screen, will be very important. Generally, here are a few tips and tricks. I've noticed that the ones that the AI recommends with its little thumbs up are actually generally pretty good. You should follow those recommendations. Secondly, you'll notice faction-specific technologies are demarked with another little circle icon. Thirdly, and taking a step back a bit, the technologies are divided into years and categories within those. Society, economy, discovery, and defense or military technologies are the 4 broad categories. They're also divided into eras, and to move through the eras, you'll need to research a certain number of techs from the era before. So particularly scientific factions or players can move through these years very quickly. Moving through is beneficial because it will increase things like your city cap, your hero cap, or provide additional yields or faction-specific benefits. So building up your science, like in any 4X game, is a huge tip, a huge benefit, and you really do need to try and do that. So what might you look to focus on then? Well, mousing over them will give you a good idea of the kind of buildings, districts, right? Improvements, or units, etc. that you can unlock. I like to shoot for the science stuff. So materials science, yeah, great. I like to unlock core districts, so markets here to get the trading post, very beneficial in Era 2. Population caps can be expanded by improvements like lodgings here buried within Creed. And military unit specializations can be unlocked, generally using the left-hand technologies like composite materials here in Era 3. Each unit has its own specialization tree, by the way, that you can generally move down using either money or resources. Resources, of course, gained through territories or bought once you've got a trading post online using the right-hand side of your screen. Some of them are special and others are strategic. The special resources have benefits that you can activate, boosters, should you have enough of them. Generally, I'd advise activating these if you've got them. Alongside discoveries like these, obviously the ultimate point of your technology as I move past this fortress here is going to be to try and get the best gear, the best upgrades, the best yields possible. Again, build up your science, move your way through. You want to get this science per turn by the end of your game up to hundreds on thousands of science, in fact. As we move toward the end of the video, I'd like to throw in a few extra tips and tricks and additional pieces of advice that aren't to do with necessarily the core game, the early game, the basics, but will help you out. We'll also talk about one more fundamental category, victory. First up, if you have nothing to build, don't be afraid to click on this Convert Production button. Generally not a good idea early on, and probably only a good idea in your extra cities, but you could look to convert your production into another yield, like this here, propaganda machine, converting my industry or production into approval. Speaking of which, let's talk approval, because it's not one of the core resources up here, right? We've got food to grow our populations that we can manage down here. We've got industry, affecting the time it takes to build something. Dust, our money, science for technologies, and influence for diplomacy or growth. But approval matters as well. Over on the left-hand side, you can see the approval graph. The city's, bar, rather. This city is pretty happy, right? 82%. But what does approval actually do? What does it mean? Well, there are a few bonuses. The current level makes the city happy, and this state will remain so long as its approval is above 60%. Approval affects overall empire growth, and if we click on the empire screen, we can see how it's impacting me overall. Currently, I am happy. Not quite as good as jubilant. Happy is giving me 15% bonuses to influence, dust, and science, which is awesome. But if I can get to jubilant, I'll double that, plus 30%. So, unlike in humankind, where I may have ignored stability, in this case approval, it's a really good yield, and I would highly recommend you get to that 85 plus point. There's no real benefit to being above 85, but 85 is that sweet spot. On this screen, you'll also be able to check the unique units you have or could have, and the kinds of technologies you might need to unlock them. You can again check your empire traits, as well as your empire's overall progress. In this case, it's my strength of zeal. We can see our population and what they get. Of course, we'll be able to train other populations should we bring in empires into the fold, uniques. And finally, down here, you'll see, in this case, actually, my hero is currently recovering. Quick tip, don't worry, your heroes will respawn. But finally, down here, you'll see the council screen. Some councillors have insanely powerful benefits. You can pick up these dudes as your heroes, which can be recruited as mercenaries, picked up naturally, or maybe you'll pick them up as you are convincing other factions to join your fold, right? As you're assimilating these independent peoples. I'd encourage you to very strongly take a look at these benefits. They are very powerful, sometimes game-changing, and potentially also a little weak at times. Seriously good. Every time you move through a monsoon season, you'll pick up an extra slot, unless you're playing as a faction who have an extra one anyway. Diplomacy matters a lot to your expansion as well. Here in this example, there's a swarm of bugs who are attacking one of my camps. Once I've attached it, it'll be harder for them to do. They'd need to declare war against me. But because this camp here is currently not attached, as you can tell by the lines across it, they can actually capture this. Now, there are a few things I can do to try and stop this. Firstly, there's a screen we haven't yet talked about called the diplomacy screen. In here, I could look to negotiate with the other empires in the map, right? So here's Prime, the bug dudes, one who stalks all. I could say, hey, let's stop being aggressive to one another. They're not so keen on that at the moment, but it's possible. We could share maps. I could spend influence to try and remove them, maybe closing my borders, or eventually declaring an unjustified war. The public opinion, your relationship with other empires, matters a lot, particularly for one of the victory conditions, as well as how they'll treat you overall. So it's a good idea to at least have some in your good books. You can achieve this by enacting more and more deals, sometimes paying a little bit of a high price for them, though often the AI will fall over themselves to be your friend. Or technologies are another great way to do this. I particularly like the cultural education, somewhat nefariously sounding technology in Era 5 to do this. It's seriously a very good one to achieve this objective. But why might any of this matter? Well, let's jump, and apologies for the break in consistency. I'm going to show you a different game here. Hopefully you're still keeping with me. If you've watched right the way through this video to this point, you probably are. Either way, thanks for being here. Let's bring it all together and talk about the, in my honest opinion, a little bit balked and likely highly subject to change victory conditions in Endless Legend 2. So here I am playing as the gloriously sciencey dudes who also have abilities up in the top part of their screen, though they're very different to the abilities that we saw with the Kin of Sheridan. Take this glassification, for example, turning the territory sort of into glass and adding a whole load of yield to it. Distractions aside, let's head to the victory page. On the left, you'll see the awakening victories. These are the conditions through each of the game's main yields, like enlightenment, science, worship over here, or maybe diversity through food and population. On the actual right-hand side, you'll also see the generic victories. These can be achieved through either conquest, by taking every city that your enemy holds and ensuring that they don't settle another one for 10 turns, honestly kind of difficult, or the score victory, which basically plays out over time, and you can mouse over it at any point to check how you're doing with each yield. In this case, my technology and diplomacy are really carrying me, while my governance or item collection is maybe not so great. The real victories are here, though, inside of the Awakening. Not the story so far. Go away, story so far. Awakening is where we want to be. In my review, I slightly mischaracterized these victory conditions. They are actually far easier to achieve than I could have ever realized, and honestly, I think they need a lot of work. In what I would describe as the early mid-game, you'll get an event. It looks a lot like this one here. It's called the Day of Reckoning. And as you move through it, you'll get to choose your path to victory. Worship, impress, or mastery. It doesn't matter which one you pick, you can change it at any time, just like I've tried to do here. Inside of these three main categories, let's take worship on the left as our example. There are additional goals, generally assigned to yields or objectives, right? You don't need to achieve all three of them. In the current build of the game, you just need to achieve one of these goals. So if I research the 6 technologies from the final era, I will win the game through the worship, enlightenment, victory condition. Or if I'd selected worship, I could choose to win in another way. Take the populations here, for example. By getting 80 of one population type, I win the game. At the moment, I have 15 to hook populations, but I also have some other ones from my factions that I've assimilated, etc. So I need to focus on one type and get it to 80, and then I win. In my view, some of these other ones will generally be easier to go for. The resource acquisition, the easiest one by far. Just make it to the point in the game after 3 Tidefalls where you've unlocked all of the resources, close out of your screen here, and buy for a measly 18, 20 of each type. Some of the resources are more expensive, so you're going to need to build up your dust. It shouldn't be too hard. You can basically win the game by just buying these. Back in the victory screen here, you could also lean into the diplomacy that I was talking about earlier, win over public opinion, and win the game. Or if expansion is more your thing, you should still be able to outpace the AI in capturing a certain number of territories, depending, I believe, on the number of players and size of the map, or go out and clear some fortresses. In my view, if you're looking for a fast path to victory, it's probably going to lie in the middle here through the impress victory conditions. Again, you just need to get one of these in the current build of the game. I've left victory to the end, not just because it's the thing that will end your game, but also because honestly I think it's a little balked, and unlike a lot of the other things in this video that we've covered, that can absolutely and will absolutely change through an early access development of Endless Legend 2, I think that victory needs the most change, because it is by far and away, in my view, one of the most broken parts of the game. For what it's worth, I think requiring both conditions would be a good idea rather than just requiring one of these pathways. I think grouping them makes sense, though maybe it makes less sense with worship than it does with others like Impress, which is about sort of economy and diplomacy, or Mastery, which is basically just about expansion, militaristic or otherwise. And that brings me to the end of this video. Thank you so much for joining me in this ultimate Endless Legend 2 beginner's guide. I've tried to strike a balance between stuff that's useful for very new players and stuff that sort of more moderately experienced strategy game players will find useful. Hopefully you've liked the balance, though more often than not, it's always a point of contention. Regardless, however you move through the game, maybe choosing to buy absurdly powerful improvements like this Alchemist's Commission, providing a whopping, if not slightly glitched, 11,700 money. I wish you all the very best. Thank you so much for watching this Endless Legend 2 tips and tricks beginner's tutorial video. I'll see you next time.